In this video, I'll be covering how VAT when selling on Amazon EU can screw up your numbers. So what's important to understand is when you're selling in EU in UK, there is a VAT which ranges from 18 to 22%, believe it or not. And this is something that you have to calculate when you're doing your numbers, your profit margins hopefully at the beginning or even before you start even selling on Amazon. So I prepared a little bit of an overview for you here. So bear with me. It's very important to get this right when you start to expand into EU. So what's the trap? The core metrics to truth. Inside Campaign Manager, inside every other tool that you use for your advertising spend in Campaign Manager on Amazon is excluding VAT. Advertising sales excluding VAT, but on business reports, it reports gross sales with VAT included. This advertising spend as an expense will be increased on your invoice by the VAT. In Italy, that's 22%, for example, and that's something that you have to have considered when you're doing your numbers. So as an example, this is where errors appear. So let's say you have a total ad spend of 10,000 euros net value and you have 120K in business report sales. What you would calculate, because you're selling in the US and you know how to calculate total ACOS, of course, you divide those two and you get to your total ACOS of 8.3% and you're happy. But the reality is much different because 10,000 euros in ad spend is net value and business reports are gross value. So that's where the issue arises. So here's the breakdown of what's actually happening. So when you go into your business reports and you take a look at the order product sales in Seller Central, you're actually looking at the money that you don't own. So the money is there, but the VAT needs to be deducted from that. And this chart visualizes how that actually looks like. So there's a 120K and you're all happy, but once the government comes and they remove your VAT, then the reality is much different. In green, it's the usable revenue after ads, and the big red chunk is unfortunately 20 or 22% VAT. So perceived total ACOS is 8.3%, but the reality is much different. It's actually 10%. Now that may sound like not much for many of you, but for some it will really make a difference. So this is difference of 1.7% of total revenue is unaccounted for. So, and as I will show in the next example, on the large volumes, this can really destroy net margins. So take a look at this. So this is the actual graph of a compounding profit drain. For an example, when you scale from 50 to 150K in monthly gross revenue. So let's go into details. Case study. So let's trace how, for example, German brand or the UK with a 20% VAT rate is blinded by this error when planning their scaling. So the baseline assumes standard fees like I've shared in the COGS tracker that we use for determining break-even ACOS and target ACOS. So you input your COGS, you input your referral, FBA fulfillment, all the other fees. And let's say that this consumes, unfortunately, 78% of net sales, leaving a target of 22 baseline operating margin. So you would, again, calculate your gross Seller Central revenue as 120K, ad spend would be 14,400, and calculated total ACOS would be 12%. You would be happy because you would think your profit target is at 12,000. So what happens is when the bank account hits up and you realize that your true net revenue base is not 120, but it's actually 100 because additional 20% come from VAT, your true net total ACOS is 14.4% compared to the 12%, and your pre-ad operating margin 22K minus ad spend or 14.400K is actually net profit remaining is only 7,600, which is 7.6 net margin. So this really makes a difference, and this is the compounding impact. By ignoring this 2.4% performance delta, the brand spent 4,400 of pure margin they didn't have on ads this month alone. Over the period of 12 months, as shown in the chart, this single blind spot results in a missing 52K in projected bank balances. So this is definitely, and imagine that if your sales are not 120, if they are 1,200,000 or 10 million or whatever. So this can really make a difference. It's something that unfortunately many of us don't look at that often, but I encourage you to start facing the truth, because it's okay that everybody makes mistakes. I make them all the time, but that's why we are here to share the knowledge, so to make everyone happy. So let me know if you have any further questions around this topic, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.